abiding in God. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness within your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Yogananda often emphasized more often to his disciples than to the general public, but also to everyone generally, for it was a universal teaching. The importance of attunement. The divine understanding cannot be created, it must be perceived. To the disciples, Yogananda spoke of the importance of attunement with the Guru. To others, he urged the importance at least of attuning oneself to higher consciousness. Can an eagle rise without support from the sustaining air? Jesus said in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 15, I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit, for without me ye can do nothing. If a man abide not in me, he is cast forth as a branch, and is withered, and men gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If ye abide in me, and my words abide in you, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done unto you. Herewith is my Father is glorified, that ye bear much fruit, so shall ye be my disciples. How can we abide in him? Jesus says, if my words abide to you, by words he meant not only his spoken words, but his vibrations, his consciousness, of which the words are only an expression. We must abide by the teachings, but we must also absorb those teachings into ourselves, that they become our own experience. For disciples of this path, the more in their hearts they live consciously in the presence of the Masters, the more they will find the divine presence living within them. And for all truth seekers, whether disciples or not, the more they live sustained inwardly by the awareness of God's presence, the higher they will find themselves soaring in wisdom and joy. For the Bhagavad Gita says in the 10th chapter, I am the source of everything. For me, all creation emerges. Blessed with this realization, the wise, awe-stricken, adore me. Thus, through holy scriptures, God has spoken to mankind. I like to imagine in the moments when Jesus lived, when he would preach in Galilee. In that time, it was an agricultural society. So they didn't have technology, or they would think of wine and fish and bread, etc., because that was their language. People could understand that. I permit myself of making another parable that is more appropriate to our time. That is internet. You know, up here where we live, in this hill, there isn't the cable of optic fiber for internet. We have to have a small antenna, and we can choose one or two companies that have an antenna, and the technician comes and puts on your roof a little antenna that searches where the transmitter in every hill is. So there is one antenna on every little hill, and he tries to find the right attunement of the signal of this antenna. And this antenna is connected to another antenna, and I think behind Gubbio there is a cable that is transmitting the signal to the World Wide Web. So to access through with this antenna into internet, you need a router. You all have to have a router that needs a username and a password. So the parable, the first thing we need to want to have access to the World Wide Web. We need to wish to have access to this conscious, omnipresent consciousness, infinite in everything. What do we have to do as first step? We know that our personal antenna is not enough to receive this signal, because these signals are everywhere, are constantly present all around us. All the information of internet is going through these hills, but our instrument is not appropriate to attune. We can't listen all the voices and all the data that is going around us. What do we need? We need to find a provider. We need someone that puts this antenna in our roof. And when we arrive to the point that we want God, that we want to find ourselves, to want to access the highest potential, and somehow we go out to look for a teaching, a technique, or a method, or a yoga school, or a spiritual master teacher, someone that can give us. He will send us the technician. It's not necessarily the same, the spiritual teacher or master, but it can be that he sends us a teacher that gives us a technique of meditation or a book. He has us understand that we have to put an antenna on our roof, and we have to open our consciousness, our interior antenna, trying to search the right positioning to be in tune and receive the signal from the divine. The techniques are this, because if we look to many ways, there will be no precise point. If we look outside, if we look through our senses, our intellectual mind, we cannot listen. And the divine, with our mind, with our senses, even with our emotions, we cannot perceive. We all need an attunement. We need this antenna that is placed in the right decisive position. Our antenna has to be calm, motionless, because if not, we cannot capture the signal. And our techniques and practice, that's what they do. They take us to that calmness, stillness, and that is the base for this antenna. But then that's not enough. We also need a technician that puts the router. You need the username. What is the username? The password as well. So the username, what is that? If I put my name, Oliver, it does not work. That doesn't work. Then, because it represents all my past, all of my self-identification, all of what I believe that I am. Oliver represents my past name. All the tendencies, all the loop that each one has had, loops of thoughts. This is what I am because in my family, in my school, when I was young, when I was older, these things would happen, and this is what formed my personality. No, with this word, with this identification, we cannot access to the World Wide Web. We need to use, in my case, is Shantidev. Shantidev accesses. Why? Why Shantidev? Because this word means I am divine. I am part of everything. I am also a son of God, so I can access to God, have access to God. Only when we have this permit interiorly, affirming, we have the faith that even us, we are divine in us. That's what the masters are telling us for years, for all ages, and we are all children of God, and we're not sinners. We have to identify with the divine act inside of us. So this is a password. This is our username, and now we need a password. What is the mantra, secret mantra that opens all the doors to the World Wide Web? Who knows it? The secret password, the secret mantra. So, obviously, we can have many, many aspects that open these doors, but I wish to give the most evident and central one, that is devotion and love. Without devotion and love, without this natural love, as Sri Yukteswar would say, we cannot even do one step forward towards this connection with the divine. Because the love and the frequency of the divine, to be able to get in contact with his frequency, we need to open ourselves to that frequency. We have to have this attraction towards the divine and towards our love towards him and her, or her. It doesn't matter what name we want to give to him or her. And then when we have access to internet, in an instant, everything opens. All the knowledge of humanity, the knowledge of everything is immediate, and we have access to everything. Isn't that true? This is the parable. Obviously, the master gives you this incredible cable of that connects you to other. From this incredibly powerful cable, he will come to help you access this connection to this ocean of knowledge, light and love. But an important preparation to have this receptiveness of our antenna, we need this silence and calmness of the mind. And Yogananda, that Swami Kriyananda tells us about Yogananda, he did not like when disciples were with him, he would ask them not to talk when they were with him. And instead, when he was in the public situation, he was a great orator, speaker. He would talk with everyone. Socially, he was perfect in that role. But when he was with his disciples, he asked for silence. So if we want to go deeper, we need to go through this process. We cannot access through words and ideas and concepts. We need to have receptiveness. Like Swami Kriyananda wrote on this reading, even the most highest disciple, Rajarsi Jaganakananda, he would say the most important thing that we can obtain is the receptiveness of perceiving, attunement to perceive. In some sense, we can affirm that our brain itself is a receiver, a radio receiver. In fact, in these studies of how consciousness is born, it is understood now that the consciousness is not produced in the brain. We are talking about a field where our brain is an antenna that accesses to this consciousness. Yogananda would say that thoughts are not ours. We are just drawing them from a field around us, of a consciousness field that is around us. And it's a bit like when you want to understand who is speaking in the radio. If you open your radio box, you don't have the journalist that is talking, obviously. The radio box is simply receiving from this field. And we are a constant antenna. We are receiving impulses. And our work is to tune our antenna to the right position with calmness, with devotion, and using all the methods and techniques that are taught. And that way, getting in contact to be able to receive and draw this divine grace. There is a story. I saw this movie that is very interesting. It could be that some of you have already seen it. It's called The Man That Saw the Infinite. This was one of the biggest mathematicians of our days. He actually lived during the First World War. He was an Indian boy that did not study, but from one day to the next started to write equations in a brilliant way. He could not stop just writing and writing these equations. So they sent him to Cambridge University. And one of the biggest teachers of mathematics, he saw his material and he invited him because he thought that he was a genius. Then he had a tragic story. He died very young. But he had written the equations of the black hole before Einstein would discover anything. He already wrote this precise equation to measure the black hole. How was that possible? When they asked him, how is it possible? He would say, I just pray the Divine Mother, my Lakshmi, and she just gives me all this information. In fact, there's this image when he was a student in Cambridge, and the teachers wanted to prove that he was a fake, and he did a very incredible equation, thinking that he would fail, and he just answered, and they were all impressed. He would say, "I don't know how I know it, but I just know it." So this is when you have this access, direct access to the World Wide Web, when you are constantly present. Receptiveness is very important. In fact, I think of the Vedas. They're called the antique scriptures of India, but they're much, much more. The Vedas, it is said, cosa? Spono? Sorry, I don't understand the word. It is all good that you can perceive. Suono, sound. Grazie. It is the sound that fragments into different mantras of the same sound. And from there, when the rishis perceive this sound, this mantra, it is not them that invented, or the rishis that have created a religion. It is not so. It's not boxed into a structure. It simply is that they receive download. The Vedas, all the scriptures of the Vedas could fill all this room. The knowledge is so incredibly large. It's written all aspect of life. It is, at the beginning, the Vedas say that they were perceived and shared mentally. Then, in moments of darkness, it was important to sing the Vedas. In fact, after that stage, Vedas now are still chanted. And then, in a different moment, they started writing them. And all the teachings of Yogananda are a continuation of these Vedas, actually, of this knowledge. That is a knowledge. This knowledge is always present, if man exists or not. So for who has really an antenna that is in the right place and in tune, can receive all of this knowledge. Every soul, when slowly it grows in this path of truth, enters in this individual expression. No one is the same. We cannot say, these are the disciples of Yogananda, do certain things in such a way, or disciples of Shivananda. From a master or teacher to a disciple, each one finds its own personal way to express this grace. I remember when I was at the beginning of my time here in Ananda many years ago. I would be in charge of the business. I would be directing inner life, the business here in Ananda, and it was difficult. I would have a lot of difficulties. I had to manage a lot of money. There were many problems that are linked to a company working with many stores in Italy. So I would look at Jayadev, my friend with which I had grown, and he was singing in the temple, really happy, speaking about God, and he had a great day of work doing all of this. And I had to go out into the commerce, but I understood that this was my path because I could grow. And in that moment, it was so good for me to do my next step toward my interior growth. Each one is in the right place. We cannot compare ourselves. Each one has his song to sing. I remember when I was 15, something happened in my life that was something that I just understood not long ago. Talking about receptiveness, it happened that I was of a philosophical nature. I was lying down on my bed and I was looking in this window that was in the roof, and I was looking at the stars and thinking about the universe. And then at one point, something happened, and I understood something that today is called the Fray graphic universe. I just understood it. I just saw this spiral of light from the smallest subatomic to the great macrocosmic, and it was such a spontaneous insight and was so powerful that I just could not continue my life in the same way. I would try to articulate this, but I know how everything works. There is a spiral, and there's the big inside the small, and there's so many dimensions. And people would think that I was completely crazy. I could not even go in school. I would look at the teachers, they were talking, but I could not listen anything what they were saying. I just could understand that they had not understood the knowledge, the fundamental knowledge. So it wasn't interesting for me. And I closed the doors to all of this world. Then books arrived. Some years after the autobiography of a yogi when I was 18. And in these books, I found the antique India, and it was exactly what I had experienced, where there was a universe that was multidimensional, and there was this scale of expansion. Then I started my spiritual path, practicing yoga and meditation, and I forgot completely this moment that was so important in my life. Then I started reading about the new science, quantum physics, and these words of a whole then I understood that I had seen that. So now when I listen, all these scientists that are doing all these new discoveries, I can feel if it's something that is in tune with my experience or not. And now I can understand how the knowledge is sometimes is not part of knowledge. Is not part of the mind. It's not a line of information that give you comprehension. Einstein had not studied physics in the university. Most of great scientists have not studied. Pananucha had not studied until he was taken to the Cambridge University. He had not even studied the basics education. The problem is that many times, if you have too much knowledge in the mind, you cannot access to this information. With Swami Kriyananda, would just get in tune with a consciousness, and he would just download the music without knowing how to write the music. Then, after he would need time to transfer into notes, but he would download the music. So we are all small antennas, and we are all trying to get in tune, and we will receive more light on this quality and this divine love that is necessary. It's the beauty to see as how Yogananda was a great transmitter that gave something that was so important to Swami Kriyananda. And Swami, in another way, lived transmitting this energy from Yogananda in many others. Swami Kriyananda has also left his body, but it's wonderful to see how this light is transmitted generation after generation, also through each one of us. We see it in many brothers and sisters. You can see how they are blossoming, each one in his own way is creating something beautiful. Each one in his own way, is letting this love and light come out.